continuing our discussion with the technical guys from the Air Force. I'm with Guy Pearce, who ended up a chief. He was something of a rabble-rouser. And, well, that's actually one of the reasons why you were sent from 5 Squadron to the workshops. Is that not right, Guy? You were sent to cheer the people up.
Yeah. Bring the morale up, because George was transferred from 5 Squadron down. This was George Heron, and he couldn't put up with all the old fuddy-duddies down there and the long faces and whatever. So because I was a noisemaker on 5 Squadron, he got me down there to bring the morale up, and then we started interaction between the different sides, because we had the vampire engines, the goblins, and on the other side of the shop there were the hunters and the cameras, where Frog or Ian was, and Dave. We all had different names, which obviously you do get. Some of the names we can't put over air, and that's why I said Frog. And Dave, he was Burst or Face Like My Dogs or something like that. And I had my own names, plenty of them. So we started shouting across at each other and bringing the morale up, and we really enjoyed working together, basically in opposition, but as a team.
But it was
my side, not really, because we were on different engines, but it was keeping the morale up and pulling each other's legs and taking the mickey out of everybody, and making the day pass, making it productive, and being happy. My side, I was put on to initiating an engine overhaul program for the vampires, and it was to take all the spares that we had recovered from South and to start building engines. It entailed taking components such as nuts, bolts, bearings, housings, gears, shafts, blades. Any and every single piece of an engine was in pieces, and I had to assemble them, put them together, build them, learn how to do it. And it took quite a long time to do that, because there's no instructions on it, never been done before in Rhodesia. It had been done many years earlier in the 60s in South Africa, done, of course, in England where they made them. But for us there, it was, here's the stuff, put it together. So although we had a base service program on the vampire engines where they did minor servicings on it, it was never ever stripped to nuts and bolts, into bits and pieces. So there was an idea of how the engine worked, how it came to pieces, how it went back together, but not a complete and utter start from scratch. My build of the nil-hour engine, as I call it, it entailed us, or myself. I did have a lot of apprentices that came through, because I was on that engine for 4 years before it actually saw the time in the air. It entailed we stripped it 4 times. From the first time we built it, we pulled it to pieces 4 times, because we had a vibration problem on it. But the vibration was sought out. One of Rhodesia's machines that we balanced it on was wrong. So that was one strip. A second one is we had actually put it together wrong. So we had to do it again. And then a further 2 times we had actually stretched the blades on testing it, because the engine, it runs at 10,700 at full revs and at 700 centigrade, and the blades stretch because they get red hot. And the diameter with its speed and the heat, the blade length increases, which puts the rotating assembly out of balance. And the reason this was taking place is the blades that go into the turbine disc are all of different modification states. So some had been made in the early 50s, in the late 60s and 70s. So they were made at different times. So the metallurgy was basically all different. So each one stretched or changed its length differently, which was then putting the unit out of balance. But it was learned. We came across the solution, but we didn't have sufficient of blades, because there's 93 of them in a disc, to sort out a full set of 93 from the same batch. And those blades were put into the turbine discs with what is called a fir tree root. And the ones that we got, of course, were all oversized to the slot that they had to go into. So they had to be filed. And that was my job. I sat there for 3 weeks. Well, I didn't say, I just stood 3 weeks filing those blades. And you had to use blue to check to see that they fitted correctly, because this is an aeroplane. You don't have a lay-by or a side of the road to stop. It's got to be 100%. And at the end of the day, we got it going, we got it fixed, it worked, it saw airtime. And I had then left the Air Force in the 78, and it flew. And when I came back as a B reservist, I got information about it, and they said it had started vibrating again, and I don't know what they did. I think they actually took the vampires out of service, probably 79, because in Mugabe's Air Force, they had Chinese MiGs and all sorts of things there. So that really was my day-to-day work. What happened as our extraneous duties, we in the engine trade had to do, like everybody else in the different trades, we had to do duty crew, which entailed seeing airplanes in, seeing them out, 3 squadron early starts, 3 squadron returns of their night flyings when they'd come back from the bush and things like that. So we did a lot of other work besides our day-to-day. Also, we had to recover and repair airplanes on our trade, the engines, in areas where, let's say, the airplane had a forced landing, engine problems, or there was a problem and it landed and then, of course, couldn't take off again, engine trouble. We now have to go out and fix it. And as I was of a senior rank, which required me to sign the controls, I was always, you're going. So I did 6 aways where 3 were Dakotas.
And what did actually happen to them?
Okay, the first one on the deck was a Wenke engine change. It had lost a cylinder. It had blown a cylinder off when it was flying. And it's an 18-cylinder engine, radial. This whole cylinder came off. And the piston was still jumping up and down in the crankcase inside the cowling. And they didn't even know there was something wrong with it until they landed, except the pilots had noted that the oil temperature had gone up. But it flew. It was the old Goonie bird. That was a piece of equipment, boy. It went and it never stopped. It just kept going. It was so reliable. And there's so many stories about that Dakota, of them putting a small wing on the one side to get it to fly, patching it up with masking tape. And one even took off with 3 times its payload. And it's a very interesting story on the Dakotas. Okay, the next Dakota, we'll go through the DAX books.
Sorry, what was this Dakota? What was this Dakota carrying with 3 times the load?
Okay, this was it wasn't overseas. It wasn't ours. Okay, this comes from the story of the Dakotas. It had steel plate on it, and they who loaded it said it was aluminium. So, so it's a wonder if it actually took off. But the reason it landed again is the pilots just couldn't get it to get altitude. So they turned around and landed it again, and when they started looking and seeing what was wrong with it, they found they had steel on it instead of aluminium. So So that is a remarkable aeroplane. But I hated them. Boy, I really hated those Dakotas.
And the other two that you had to go to?
The two engine change at Rhodesia. That was just a 3-day with Russell Vontenaar from 3 Squadron. Went down there. Again, you see a senior have to do the controls checking, go and help him. And the third one was a recovery, or we went to burn it because it had flown through power lines. It was flying up the Lundi River. They were doing game viewing, low level, and they didn't see the power lines. And they flew through the power lines, which then caused the aeroplane to lift, climb, and also turn in the air. So basically it was at riverbed level, because they were flying along the riverbed, looking at the game. They didn't see the power lines, and they flew straight into the power lines, straight through the cockpit, took the pilots straight out, pulled the controls back, and it turned. So the aeroplane lifted and turned over onto its like 90 degrees, doing a very steep bank. And it flew around in basically an ever decreasing circle, dropping out of the sky slowly, because it was just above tree level. Port wing hits now the trees, starts catching, but it's still flying. Because it's in full power, it's going, pilots are deceased, and the airplane is coming down on its port wing, down, and the port wing is actually disintegrated. It's just worn off. Then it hits the ground, belly flops, spins around, breaks in half, and the 2 pilots are the only casualties. I think there were 6 air movers on there, and they all escaped. One had a bad leg problem, and the rest of them were fine. So we now have to go and destroy that aeroplane, because it was against protocol for the gooks to have pieces of the aeroplane and say, this is what we've done, whatever. So we went down there to the Lundi. We go across with some 4x4s, a 7-ton truck 4x4, and a kudu. It was a 4x4 built on a Ford chassis. We get into the Lundi River, the 7-ton gets stuck. we pull it out. We get it out with the 4x4 kudu, put the vehicles on the bank, and now we walk across the river. Easy targets for somebody sitting waiting for us. We didn't even think about it. We're the Blue Johns, eh? We're not the Browns. We don't know anything about being shot or whatever. So we walk across there. We're carrying dynamite now to go and burn this aeroplane. And uneventful, fortunately, they put the dynamite into the airplane tanks, and they tried to blow to bits, but it was unsuccessful. The Browns had to do the job for us and burn it properly. So we came back there. It was the 3rd Dakota. Then
was this in Ghana Resort? Was there
you weren't
eaten by lions or anything?
Yeah, because everything sort of took place for me down there in the Chiredzi Lundi area on the decks. Okay, then we did a helicopter. I went out and did a helicopter engine change at Ruda in Montali there. And first time for me to ever put my hands onto working on a helicopter. I can't remember if we flew in or we drove in to take all the engine bits and pieces there, because we took an engine and we took the lifting equipment and our tools, and the 7th Squadron tech was there. The pilot, I don't know where he was, he's long gone, but we're sitting on the Ruda runway, and the 7th Squadron tech, he's done an engine change before me. No, never even seen one before. So now we go and we pull this engine out, we put the lifting sling on, and as we're lifting the engine up on the sling, we swivel it around to put it down, and the lifting sling bends over sideways. Finished. Okay, so the engine is just about on the ground. We managed to manhandle it down, Now we get a problem. How are we going to put the new engine back on the thing? Anyway, I went down into the TTL where there was a African storekeeper, whatever. He had a welding machine. I borrowed his welding machine, picked up a few bits of old steel that he was lying in his shop, welded the lifting sling back together. I had $2. That's all I had with me, because when you're going to and from work, what do you need more than $2 for? It bought you, what did it buy you? 20 Cokes, eh? $2 would have bought you 20 Cokes. It didn't need that. So $2 was fine for a trip away. I gave him the $2 for payment for his welding rod and his whatever we took from him. I don't think he had much option, because we were the security forces and he was the povo. But I gave him some money, took the sling back, got the engine on. Now the gooks in Mozambique start opening up with mortar. But fortunately, maybe they didn't see us there, or they're shooting somewhere else, but it didn't come to us. But I tell you, it was a bit disconcerting. And helicopter engine in, running, fine, off we went. That was the end of that one. Grand Reef, Lynx, rear engine, bullet hole through the induction manifold. So it had lost its boost, so power was down. Must go and change it. We drove there. Rich Palmer, who's I think has had some say earlier on with you through Dave. He came with me and a couple of appies. We go now, we're going to change this. Again, never put our hands and spanners on this machine ever. You just had to do it. No one taught you, you just had to do it. So we changed that. And at this time, I had already left the Air Force and I was a B reservist. And what had to happen when you were a person who was living out was I lived in for a long time. And when you lived out and also be reservists, for us being in the engine shop with our away extraneous duties for repair, recovery, you had to take your IS kit and your shaving kit and your towel and your change of clothes and whatever, and you leave it in your crew room. So if you need it, it's there. You don't have to go home and get it first and whatever. So yeah, we get this call out. So we get everything organized, all the bits and pieces on the truck. I take my bag from the crew room, stick it in the truck, and off we go. We get there. Everything in my bag has been stolen. So I'm at Grand Reef now for 3 days in the same shirt, underpants, socks, clothes, and I couldn't get any more. I asked the storeman there, you got any of this? Can you get something? And said, no chance. So that was a bit of a mission. Have a bath, you just shake yourself dry and put your dirty clothes back on. So that wasn't too good. But that's what happened there. We got that airplane going, sorted it out, and we came back. And the last one, which is a little bit of amusement, was again now down the Lundi, a Trojan. Now, the Trojan, I don't know if you're aware of it, was the only airplane in the world that can have a bird strike on the tailing edge of the wing. Now, to put that into perspective, is it flies so slow that a bird can crash into it and damage the back of the wing. Anyway, it also turned petrol into noise. It didn't make it go faster. When you opened the throttle, it just made more noise. It didn't go any faster. They were really a bit of junk. But anyway, they did their job of CASEVACs and spotting and sighting and sorting people, things like that. So anyway, this Trojan goes in on this runway, right down now in the triangle game reserve of Rhodesia, South Africa, and Mozambique on the Lundi River. And we fly in there, got all our bits and pieces to take out. First of all, the DAC had to fly over to chase all the game off the runway. There were buffalo, there were all sorts of animals there. Now, on the runway, there was a old army camp. It had an 8-foot fence around it. It had some rondels in it, a bit of toilets and whatever. And we had been told that the people who were there before, and I think it was the Browns, they had this pet donkey there. And a couple of days before we got there, lion jumped over the fence and ate the donkey. So we weren't too impressed about being there with all the game and the lion eating the donkey, but nothing we can do about it. We aren't going to do guard duty on that aeroplane. It's outside the security fence. We're not going outside there. There's too many things that'll eat us. So we only each had one rat pack, and they were supposed to resupply us the next day. Okay, we're still waiting for that. And so we did what we could on the first afternoon, and we got the engine out, we got the other engine back in, and we hadn't finished doing it. Again, first time of changing an engine on the Trojan. So it comes supper time now, we can take our rat pack and we're going to go and sit on the edge of the bank of the river, but with inside the security fence. So we're sitting there and we decide, this is not so good. We're in a very vulnerable position here because across the river is Mozambique. So we retired to behind the Rendavel where we ate our supper. Now it's bedtime, stretch it out, sleeping bag, no sheets. Because normally when the Air Force goes away, it's got stretcher, sleeping bag, and the sleeping bags come with sheets. Okay, but we were roughing it this time. We had no sheets. you know, with the Air Force, when they go away, they've got beds, they've got sheets, they've got food, a cooked meal in 24 hours. Unfortunately, the poor Browns, they were living on rat packs for how many weeks? And the blue jobs, 24 hours, and we had a cooked meal. We really were the gentlemen of the war. Yeah. So now it's supper time. We've eaten, nothing to do. We don't have lights. We've got nothing. So we decide we're going to sleep in this quite a big Rendavel. I think there was 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 of us. Put our beds down, put our there, whatever. Okay, nothing to do. Time to go to sleep. Now, the door on this Rendavel doesn't lock, and it's sort of on one half of a hinge, so it's hanging at an angle, whatever. So we close it the best we can. No one's doing guard duty. We all, we all bloody bungbrook there, yeah? So we get into bed, we go to sleep. I don't know what time it was, but it was as dark as dark. There was nothing. You couldn't see anything. It was just black. But this door creaks open. Oh my goodness. Now we don't know what's going on. And you just hear these FNs as we're cocking these FNs. Now we don't know what to do. We can't see anything. We didn't even know the door was open because there was no light or the moon, stars, nothing. It was just pitch black that night. And then Bob says to us, hey, easy chaps, he thinks it was just the wind, okay, opening the door. Because if we had started opening up, we would have shot each other, being in the wrong level. Because one, we couldn't see each other, and being in a round, we were virtually opposite each other. So we would have just let rip and taken everybody out inside there. But fortunately, it was just the wind. Then the next morning, we got no food. Now, we've eaten it. We finished the machine, and they never brought us any food. We ran it. It worked. I don't know how we communicated with Serum to tell them that the plane is ready. They sent in Vic Kalpin with a DAC to take all our bits and pieces, the old engine, our tools, and us. And we now had to do what it was called a short takeoff because the end of the runway was Mozambique. So he had to get off and turn in Rhodesia before he got off the end. My goodness, was that a short takeoff. And as soon as he got the wheels up, it was just wing down and left, and it was pull hard and got us out. Good pilot, Vic. And that's basically there. And then in end of 78, I retired, and then I had been called up in 79 and 80 again as a be reservist. I did for my my troubles. I heard Ian earlier on saying about all the overtime he had done in the engine shop there. I did 850 hours overtime in the 4 years I was there. And for my work on the Vampire engine, the Goblin, I was awarded a MFC for my abilities, and I've got a certificate, and I had a medal, and some beauty broke in here and pinched them all.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it, Hannes. I think that's everything there that we did. But really enjoyed the comradeship of the people there, and having worked now in Civvy Street for 35 years, 45 years, 45 years, the Civvy Street people really didn't know what they missed of not being in maybe a military establishment, definitely the Air Force. Anyway, it was really fantastic. You know, we had our functions in the mess, our dances, which as a civilian, the best you can do is you would have gone to cock door and you would have ended up in a fight and something like that. But the comradeship there, the dining in nights, we had ladies dining in nights, it really, really was good. So I enjoyed myself there, really did, when you look back on it.
Guy, just tell me again, so that engine took 4 years to build, and it's the only time it was ever done, that Goblin engine.
That's correct. It was because we were having a vibration problem on it. It would be fine when you ran it up to 10,000 revs. The moment you got it over 10,250, it started shaking nuts off. So, of course, we had to find the reason for it. And no one could tell us the reason. We eventually sorted it and worked it as what the reason was. Because that the maximum speed on was 10,750, but you had to use 10,750 to get the airplane off the ground. So 10.2 was not an operational requirement. It's got to be the maximum, full power.
And Guy, the Vampire airframe, it was a wood composite, wasn't it? It was a very light airframe.
It had a boom, 2 booms. That was all aluminium, and it was only the cockpit area that was a wooden structure.
Okay.
And we used to cajole about the white ants in it. You know, when the pilots would come back and they'd fly over and pull excessive G's, we'd say, we hope the white ants are holding hands, holding the thing together. Otherwise it would fall to bits.
Guy, did you do any work on the Canberra engines?
No, I did one on a Hunter. I did what was called a bay service, where we take all the combustion chambers off, take the turbines off, inspect it, clean it, look at it, weld up the broken pieces of the combustion chambers, because they were made out of a harmonic alloy and they used to crack. Plus the fact is they were 25 years old and they probably only were designed to do 500 hours. Now, just talking on hours, that Vampire engine was designed for the Second World War, and it was designed to run 150 hours only. It ended up lifed at 900 hours when we were using them. So they kept increasing them as they kept going, but its initial was 150 hour only. It was to go up and the Luftwaffe was going to shoot it down.
Guy, how did you guys check airframes for stress fractures? Was that did you have an electronic, was it an X-ray process? How did you look for cracks?
Okay, that became a section of its own under NDT, and Ian ended up in Civvy Street doing that, and non-destructive testing, where they had almost like an ultrasound that they use today on us, where they had this probe that they would rub across stressed areas like on the Canberras, on the main spars, because they knew the main spars were cracking, and they were drilling and filling them with epoxy and all sorts of things to stop the cracks, because they had served their hours, but we were still using them. Was one actually lost its wings on takeoff.
Yes. Yes, I remember.
By the tobacco research there, it went in by the tobacco research. The wings fell off just after takeoff. And that's when they started paying much attention to it. And I think the non-destructive testing section came into fore there. But that's how they used to do that. I think that was the only aeroplane that they really checked for fatigue. The Dakota is not having a main spar, whereas the Canberra had a main spar. That Dakota, when it was 1938 or something, it came out, it still doesn't have a life on it. You just keep flying the thing. And the other airplanes, I think the Vampire, it had a life on it, on airframe. But I wasn't airframe, so I only picked up what was going on, but didn't pay much attention to it because I was too involved with my own side of things.
Well, Guy, thanks for your time, man. Very interesting, and I'm just pleased we've been able to give you guys, a chance to talk about what was going on, because it's a remarkable story about what some people say was the finest small air force in the world.
Correct. I think the Swiss took the number one, and I think we were very close to them. Most efficient air force in the world. Okay, Guy. Thanks for your time, my mate. And when are we going to hear your side of your input? Is it recorded as well? No. Not? No. Because I can see the pictures in the background there. You obviously were a brown job. Yeah. Is that you? Yeah, that's actually me and my dad. My dad was actually attached to the. He was a doctor already in the Second World War, but he spent a lot of his time attached to the South African Air Force. So he was with the South African Air Force in the desert. So he knew a lot of the fighter pilots and lots of stories about those guys during the Second World War. Did your dad go to Cairo? Yeah, he did. And then he ended the war in Italy. Okay, because my dad was on the Dakotas with the South African Air Force, and he went to Cairo. Oh yeah, I think those guys had a ball there. I tell you, I don't think war was too tough for them for quite a lot of the time. They were having a bloody good time. Yeah. Anyway, Guy. So if we want to now pick up this whole story, how are we going to access it, Hannes? John will tell you. Look, I'm gonna stop. And that was. So, tell us about the Hunter engine. Okay, I did this Hunter engine as a base service, and because I used to do a lot of motorbike overhauls and painting and whatever, and I painted this Hunter engine yellow and black, like a bumblebee. And the hierarchy weren't too impressed with it. But you see, this is what I just said to you about how I used to bugger it around, you see. But anyway, they tested it, it ran fine, and the yellow turned into a golden brown, and they thought it was quite nice afterwards. Because I wanted to paint one of my Vampires red and green in noddy colors, red and green and blue and yellow, because the Vampire had 16 combustion chambers on it. And I wanted to paint each one in a different color, just to be different. Anyway, just shows how much nonsense I got up to.